Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to factor trinomials where the leading coefficient is something other than 1. So in the last lesson, these coefficients, the coefficient of x squared was 1. And so in this lesson, the coefficient will be something other than 1. So this section, we're going to factor these trinomials using what we sometimes call trial and error. And in the next section, so it'll be this section, and in the next section, we'll use what's called the grouping method. And then it'll also be called the AC method. So they kind of go hand in hand here. All right, so it'll be the next section. So you really need to know when factoring trinomials, these two methods, the trial and error method and the grouping method. So it'll be the next section. Okay, so let's start off with this example. So we're going to factor completely. So remember, anytime I use the word factor, make sure you understand that it means factor completely. Okay, so let's factor this trinomial. So we have 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. So 2x squared plus 13x plus 15. So let's review a couple of things from the previous lesson. So remember, if the last sign's positive, then that means that when I factor as two binomials, so when I look for those two factors whose product is this trinomial, that means that these signs in here is going to be the same. Either these two last terms, either they're both negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive, because I need a positive 15, or they're both positive. Positive times a positive is a positive 15. But remember, we also talked about the outer and the inner, because I need the outer and the inner, the FOIL method, to give us this middle term. So you're still going to use the idea of FOIL, just like you did in the last section, but we're going to do this one as trial and error, since the coefficient of x squared is not 1. In this case, the coefficient of x squared is 2. All right? Okay, so remember our sign rules. We're going to talk about sign rules. We're going to talk about FOIL. And we're going to use the words trial and error. So you're going to see what I mean by that as we go through this. Okay, so just like the last section, you're going to look at f, the first terms of each binomial. So what two factors multiplied together will give us 2x squared? So that one's easy because 2 is prime. So we're just going to say 2x and x. All right, so since 2 is prime, you only have one possibility. The factors of a prime number are 1 and itself. Okay, so always remember that the factors of a prime number are 1 and itself. Okay, so now we go, so that takes care of the F. Now we go to the L, remember in the last section, so always be consistent. So we go to the L. And so I need two numbers whose product is 15. So give me two factors of 15. So that way when I multiply them out, I get 15. So for example, factors of 15, I can say 5 times 3 is 15. I can say 15 times 1 is 15. And those are the only possibilities. So two factors whose product is 15. Usually what you want to try, though, you want to try the numbers, the factors that are close together in the number line first. It doesn't always work. You can see that in a few examples that the numbers close together in the number line don't always work. All right, but that's what I would try first. I would try the numbers close together in the number line. All right, so that means I need to put a 5 here and a 3 here. Okay, now remember, it does not matter right now. It does not matter right now where you put the 5 and 3. Remember in the last section when we did that little chart, and once we found our sum and our product, we said it did not matter where you put each one. Well, here it will. It will matter this time because the coefficient is no longer 1. This coefficient is 2. So it is going to matter. It is going to matter where you put the 5 and the 3. But just put them anywhere for right now. It's just trial and error. We're using trial and error. Okay, put them anywhere. But remember our signs. The last sign's positive. That means that these signs in here have to be the same, either both positive or both negative. But remember, you want to add the out and the inner to give us a positive. The only way that can happen is if these are both positive terms. So I'm going to get 2x plus 5 times x plus 3. Now, don't assume that that's your answer. Remember, all I've done was check the F and the L. I have not checked the outer and the inner. So let's check the outer and the inner. The outer is 6x, a positive 6x. The inner is a positive 5x. When I add them up, I get 11x. So they did not work. So these two factors multiplied together does not give me this trinomial. So now let's try this. Let's try switching the 5 and the 3. So remember, trial and error. So I tried this. It did not work. I got an error. So let me try another one. So let's try this one. So I'm going to say 2x plus 3 times x plus 5. See, all I did was just switch the terms, the last terms. All right, so let's see what happens. Now, don't assume that that's your answer. Remember, you always need to check your work using FOIL. All right, let's look at the outer. The outer is 10x. The inner is 3x. And when I add them up, a positive 10x and a positive 3x is 13x. And that's what I wanted. So the answer is 2x plus 3 times x plus 5. Or you can say x plus 5 times 2x plus 3, because remember, multiplication is commutative. The order in which you multiply does not matter. All right, so there's your answer. All right, so that's number 1. So notice what we did. Since a coefficient was coefficient of x squared is no longer 1, we're still going to use the idea of factoring as two binomials, just like we did in the last few lessons. We're still going to use the idea of FOIL, but we're using the idea of trial and error because now these numbers that I find that I think may work, the order in which you place them, the place where you put them does matter. So notice that when I put the 5 in the first parentheses and the 3 in the second parentheses, when I checked the outer and inner, it did not work. So we switched it, we checked the outer and inner again, and now it did work. So there's your answer. So 2x squared plus 13x plus 15 factored is the product of these two factors, these two binomials. All right, let's look at another one. So that's number 1. Okay, number 2. All right, let's suppose we had this. Let's suppose we had 8y squared minus 17y plus 9. So 8y squared minus 17y plus 9. Okay, so again, and I didn't mention this in the first one, but you really always need to check and see if we have a GCF other than 1. So here the GCF was 1 of each of those 3 terms. The GCF was 1. If it wasn't 1, just like you did in the past lessons, you would factor it out first. Here the GCF is 1. The GCF is 1 for those 3 terms. So I'm going to go directly to two binomials. Now remember, I'm using trial and error, and I'm using FOIL as we go through this. All right, so let's do the F first. So give me 2 numbers whose product is 8y squared. So there are a few possibilities. There's for 8y squared, I'm going to write it out here just to show you. So I can say 4y times 2y. I can say 8y times 1y. All right, and so these are the only possibilities. So let's try the 4 and the 2y first, the 4y and the 2y. So let's put 4y and 2y here and see if it works. All right. Okay, so that takes care of the f. So far I'm good. Now remember, I'm going to check this at the end to see if it really works. Okay, let's go to the L. So I need 2 numbers, 2 factors of 9, so that way when I multiply them out, I get a positive 9. So remember, it's a positive 9 I need. All right, so it's a positive 9 I need, so that means that these two signs in here must be the same. Positive times a positive is a positive, A negative times a negative is a negative, but remember, the outer and the inner, when added up, needs to be a negative 17y. So it needs to be negative. The only way that can happen is if both of those are negative. All right. So let's look at 9. The possibilities for two factors whose product is 9. So there's 9 times 1, and there's 3 times 3. All right. Let's try 3 and 3 first. We're trying to the numbers closer together on the number line. All right. Remember, trial and error. Now, at some point, you'll be able to look at this and very quickly, more quicker, or should I say quicker than what we're doing here. So let's put the 3 here, the 3 there, and let's see what happens. Okay, so far my f is okay because 4y squared times 2y squared is 8y squared. The L is fine. A negative 3 times a negative 3 is a positive 9. Now let's check the outer and the inner. The outer is negative 12y. The inner is a negative 6y. When I add them up, I get a negative 18y. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted a negative 17y, so that didn't work. So I try something else. Let's go to something else. So you may say, all right, can we switch the 4y and the 2y? Sure you can. Let's see what happens. Since the last terms were the same, it didn't matter whether you switch them or not. I mean, they're the same. So let's switch the first terms and see what happens. So let's put 2y here, 4y here. I'm still going to say minus 3 times minus 3. All right, remember the f and the L. 2y times 4y is still 8y squared. A negative 3 times a negative 3 is still a positive 9. But remember, don't say that's your answer without checking the outer and the inner. The outer is negative 6y. The inner is a negative 12y. When I add those up, I get a negative 18y. So negative 6, negative 12. Okay? So that didn't work either. All right? So then you might say, all right, I've tried 4y, 2y. I tried 2y, 4y. So you may say, well, let's go ahead and do the 8y and 1y, see what happens. All right, let's try that. So let's try 8y and y. 8y and y. All right. Now let's put the and for the 9, you may want to try 3 and 3 again. All right. But some of you may notice right away. Remember, they're both negative. Some of you may notice right away that this will not work. This will not work because when you look at the outer, that's a negative 24y. It's already bigger than what I wanted because if this is negative and this is negative, when you add them up, you're going to get a negative 27y. So that didn't work. All right, so switching 8y and y is still not going to matter because these last terms are the same. So notice when I switch the 2 and the 8y and the 4y here, you see you got the same thing. You may say, why did I get the same thing? Well, you got the same thing because of the last terms. The last terms were identical. So whether you keep them as 4y and 2y or switch them as 2y, 4y, you'll get the same thing. The outer and the inner will still add up to be negative 18y. So right here, I'm not going to waste my time switching 8y and y. It's not going to work. I'm still going to get, you can try it, I'm still going to get negative 27y. So what I'm thinking about doing then, that doesn't work. So what I'm thinking about doing then, instead of using 3 and 3, let's use 9 and 1 and see what happens. All right, so 9 and 1. So let's do it here. So I'm going to get, I'm going to keep 8y and y the same. So 8y and y. But instead of using 3 and 3, I'm going to use 9 and 1. So let's put the 9 here and the 1 there. If it doesn't work, we're going to try something else. If it doesn't work, we'll switch a 9 to 1, see what happens. Now remember, the last sign's positive right here. The last sign's positive. That means that these signs in here have to be the same. So these signs in here have to be negative. All right, so far, my f is okay because 8y times y is 8y squared, right here. A negative 9 times a negative 1 is a positive 9. So my F and L of the FOIL is good. Now let's check the outer and the inner. I need the outer and the inner to add up to be a negative 17y. So the outer is a negative 8y, the inner is a negative 9y, and when add them up, you get a negative 17y, which is what you wanted. So the answer is this. There's your answer. So 8y squared minus 17y plus 9, 8y squared minus 17y plus 9 equals 8y minus 9 times y minus 1. Or remember, you can always say y minus 1 times 8y minus 9. Does not matter. Alright, so trial and error. So notice the different possibilities I tried before I came up with the right answer. Now some of you could have gone through this much quicker than I did. So some of you could look at this at some point. You could look at this and then say, it has to be this. Alright, but again, always check your work. Always check your work using FOIL to make sure you get this trinomial back. Alright, so that was number 2. Alright, let's try let's try this one. Alright, 10x squared plus 31x plus 3. So 10x squared plus 31x plus 3. So again, the last sign's positive. So we're going to do about 4 examples where the last sign's positive. Then we're going to do some examples where the last sign's negative. All right, just remind you about the previous lessons, what happens in those cases. All right, so here we go. The last sign's positive. First of all, the GCF here is 1. Always look for GCF first. GCF is 1. So I'm going to go directly to the 2 binomials. All right, again, I'm using the idea of FOIL and trial and error. All right, let's do the F first. What 2 factors when multiplied together will give us 10x squared? All right, so you might want to say, well, 5x times 2x gives us 10x squared. Okay, we can do that. We can try 5x and 2x. That's a 2 right here. We could try that. All right, now 3 is prime, so that's a good thing because there's only one possibility, 3 and 1. All right, now remember though, the last sign's positive, so that means that these signs for the last term has to be the same. Either they're both positive or they're both negative. So remember, it's going to be this middle sign right here because I need the outer and the inner to add up to be positive. So the only way that can happen is if these are both positive. All right, so let's try 3 and 1. So let's put the 3 here, the 1 there, and see if it works. All right, so the outer is 5x, and obviously you can see right away it's not going to work. The inner is 6x, and when I add them up, I get 11x, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted positive 31, so that didn't work. So you might say, well, let's keep the 5x and the 2x the same, and then let's switch the 1 and the 3. Again, they're both be positive. All right, let's check it this time. The outer is 15x, the inner is 2x. Add them up, you get 17x. That didn't work. All right, so then you might say, well, I've used up all possibilities of 5x squared. 5x and 2x, and I switched the 2 and the 3 and the 1. 3 is prime. There's only one possibility, 3 and 1. So then you might think, well, instead of using 5x and 2x, let's use 10x and 1x. So remember the possibilities for 10x squared. For 10x squared is 5x times 2x, or you can say 10x times x. All right, so I'm going to stop using these for right now. I'm going to go ahead and use 10x and x. So let's see what happens. All right, so here we go. 10x times x. And it didn't matter whether you put x here or 10x there. It does not matter. You're using trial and error. You're going to try the factors that's going to work. All right, and again, we're going to use 3 and 1. So let's I'm going to put that down. So 3, the only possibility is 3 times 1. So let's, for right now, put the 3 here, the 1 there. It's not going to work, but I want to show you why. You could look at this and know right away which one works, whether to put the 3 here or the 1 there. All right, again, both plus because positive times a positive is a positive. And then when I add them up, when I do the outer and the inner, the outer is going to be positive, the inner is going to be positive, I'll get a positive. But I've got to make sure that when I add them up, I get this positive 31x. All right, so the outer is a positive 10x, the inner is a positive 3x. Add them up, I get 13x. That did not work. So let's switch the 3 and the 1 this time. Let's switch the 3 and the 1. So let's say 10x plus 1 times x plus 3 and see what happens. All right, the outer is 30x, the inner is 1x. When I add them up, I do get 31x, and that's what I wanted right here. So let's verify though. FYL, first, 10x times x is 10x squared, so that takes care of this. The L, a positive 1 times a positive 3 is a positive 3, so that takes care of L. And the outer and the inner I've already done. So the outer is 30x, the inner is 1x. When I add them up, I get 31x. So I've done this. So these are correct. So there's your answer right here. So that's what you put in the blank. So you would say, in this case, you would say 10x squared plus 31x plus 3 equals 10x plus 1 times x plus 3. All right? Okay, so that's number 3. So notice trial and error. You try different things. Check your work using FOIL. If it doesn't work, try something else. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and stop this one because we're already at 22 minutes.